My name is Sophia. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Chicago, Illinois. My days are structured and predictable. I work as a billing coordinator at a regional hospital, managing accounts, chasing insurance claims, and keeping numbers aligned. It's not glamorous work, but it's mine. At home, I handle everything else. Groceries, cleaning, the small repairs that never quite make it onto anyone else's list. No children, no clutter, just me and my husband, Daniel. Daniel is 35. He's a corporate lawyer at one of the city's more prestigious firms, the kind of man who fills a room without trying. Tailored suits, measured words, a handshake that made clients trust him instantly. When we walked into a restaurant together, people noticed him first. I used to feel proud standing beside him. Lately, I mostly felt invisible. October 3rd was supposed to be different. Our 7th wedding anniversary and Daniel's 35th birthday landing on the same date the way they always had. I had been planning it quietly for weeks. I left work 2 hours early, stopped at his favorite Italian deli for fresh pasta and the specific brand of red wine he preferred, then drove across town to a bakery that did custom orders. The cake was simple: ivory frosting, clean edges, and a small inscription across the top. For Daniel, 7 years and still choosing you. Back home, I moved through the apartment with intention. I draped a deep burgundy cloth over the dining table, set out the good plates we rarely used, and tucked a small candle into a glass holder at the center. I wasn't trying to be extravagant. I just wanted the evening to feel like something worth remembering. By 7 o'clock, I had changed into a navy dress, brushed my hair back, and sat down to wait. 8 o'clock came. I lit the candle. 8:45, I sent a message. Dinner's ready whenever you are. The 2 gray ticks sat unread for 20 minutes, then turned blue. No reply. At 9:30, I called. 4 rings, then his voicemail. That smooth, professional tone he used for clients. I hung up without leaving a message. At 11:52 p.m., a text arrived. Stuck in a late meeting. Don't wait up. Sorry. No happy anniversary. No acknowledgement of the date. Just 3 words of apology dressed up as an explanation. I read it twice, set the phone face down on the table, and looked at the untouched plates. The candle had burned itself to a stub. The pasta had gone cold an hour ago. The cake was still in the refrigerator, undisturbed. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I just began putting it all away. Covered the food, stored the wine, blew out what remained of the candle, and folded the burgundy cloth into a neat square. Then I changed out of the navy dress, hung it carefully, and lay down in the dark. Sleep didn't come easily. The ceiling held my stare for a long time. I kept thinking about how I had stood in the deli that afternoon choosing between 2 cuts of pasta like the decision mattered. It had felt like it mattered. The next morning, Daniel wasn't home. No message explaining where he'd stayed. I got dressed and went to work the way I always did, carrying the silence with me like something I was used to the weight of. By mid-morning, I still hadn't heard from him. No text, no missed call, nothing. The absence of contact felt less like an oversight and more like a statement. At noon, I called his office. The phone rang 3 times before the receptionist picked up. Could I speak with Daniel, please? A pause. Slightly too long. I'm sorry. Daniel actually left the firm. He gave his notice about 2 weeks ago. We don't have any forwarding contact on file. I stood in the corridor outside the break room, one hand pressed flat against the wall. The noise of the hospital filtered in from somewhere down the hall. Wheels, voices, the distant ping of an elevator. And none of it registered. 2 weeks. He had resigned 2 weeks ago and said nothing. Not a word over breakfast, not a mention in passing, not a single sign that anything in our life was about to change. I had been moving through a marriage that had already been quietly vacated. I left work the moment my afternoon was clear. The drive home felt mechanical, like my body was operating on instructions my mind hadn't finished processing. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. I don't know why. Some instinct toward slowness, toward postponing what I already suspected was waiting. I unlocked the apartment door. The first thing I noticed was the hallway closet. Slightly open, one side of the hanging rod noticeably lighter than the other. A gap where his coats used to be. Daniel? Nothing. I moved toward the bedroom. The door was open. He was there, standing beside the bed, a large duffel bag spread open on the mattress. He was folding a charcoal dress shirt with the focused efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this moment. Beside the bag sat a suit carrier, zipped, and a pair of leather shoes still in their box. Tags on, never worn. What is this? I asked, stopping in the doorway. He looked up. Not startled, not guilty. Just measured. You're home early, he said, and went back to folding. I stepped into the room. Where are you going? Houston. He smoothed a crease from the shirt with his palm. "I've taken a position down there. I start in 10 days. The words didn't land the way words usually do. They arrived in pieces, each one requiring a moment to place. "You took a job in Houston." "Yes," without telling me. He reached into the nightstand drawer, removed a manila folder, and set it on the bed between us. I already knew what was inside before I opened it. The weight of the folder, the deliberate way he placed it, it told me everything. Divorce papers, professionally prepared, already signed on his line, waiting only for mine. Daniel. My voice came out quieter than I intended. What is this? He met my eyes then, and what I saw wasn't cruelty exactly. It was something colder. Finality. "It's not working, Sophia. It hasn't been for a long time. You don't think we could have had this conversation before you packed a bag? I'm having it now. You're not having a conversation. You're issuing a verdict." He exhaled through his nose. "You're always working. You come home exhausted and distant. The apartment is a mess half the time. I feel like I live with a roommate who pays half the bills and nothing else." Something tightened in my chest. "I work because we have rent. I come home tired because I've been at a hospital since 7 in the morning. And I clean this apartment. I clean it constantly. But your version of a mess is a dish left in the sink for an hour. I'm not interested in debating this." "Of course you're not. You've already decided." He zipped the duffel bag and lifted it off the bed. "I've rented a furnished place near the new office. I'll be out of your way." "Out of my way," I repeated. 7 years, Daniel. I know how long it's been. "Do you?" I stepped aside so he could pass, because what else could I do? I couldn't hold someone in a doorway against their will. "Do you have anything to say to me? Anything at all?" He paused at the threshold, his back to me. For a moment, I thought something human might surface. Then, my attorney's number is on the folder, and he was gone. The door didn't slam. It closed with a soft, definitive click, which somehow felt worse. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the folder in my lap, the room around me reorganized by his absence. Then the building management office called. The leasing coordinator informed me, with careful professionalism, that the primary leaseholder had submitted a termination request effective end of month. He had left a note. "I no longer reside at this address. The remaining occupant will vacate before the deadline." No conversation. No notice. Just a note, like a forwarding address. That evening, I went through the apartment slowly, opening drawers, checking receipts. Almost everything of substance, the furniture, the appliances, the small practical objects that made a home, was registered under my name. He had taken clothes, his laptop, a few items from the desk. He had left the life we'd built together and taken only what was personally his, which, I was beginning to understand, was how he had always seen it. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table for 4 days. I walked past them each morning, each evening, and each time I stopped and looked at them the way you look at something you know you'll eventually have to pick up. Not because I was uncertain. His departure had made uncertainty impossible, but because signing felt like agreeing that this was real. That 8 years could end with a folder left on a bed. On the 5th evening, my phone showed a notification from a college group chat I'd largely ignored for months. A reunion. 8 years out from graduation, at a rooftop bar in Lincoln Park. I had bought a ticket for it weeks ago, back when I'd imagined arriving with Daniel, the two of us a steady point among old friends navigating messier lives. That version of the evening no longer existed. I almost stayed home. Then I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Tired eyes, jaw set, a face that was holding itself together through sheer habit. And I made a different decision. Black dress, earrings, a coat against the October chill. Not for anyone else, just to prove to myself that I could still walk into a room. The bar was warm and crowded with the specific energy of people who haven't seen each other in years. Half-recognized faces, voices slightly older than you remembered, conversations that jumped between the present and the past without warning. I found a spot near the railing and was standing there with a drink, feeling pleasantly anonymous, when someone said my name. I turned. Marcus. He'd been 2 years ahead of me, quiet in that particular way that gets mistaken for aloofness until you actually talk to someone. He looked largely the same. A little steadier, maybe, the way people sometimes do when they've been through something that settled rather than broke them. "I wasn't sure it was you," he said. "You look exactly the same and completely different at the same time." We ended up at a small table in the corner for most of the evening. He told me he'd been divorced for 2 years, raising his 7-year-old daughter, managing a landscape architecture firm he'd started from scratch. He talked about his daughter the way people do when someone is genuinely the center of their world, not with performance, just with quiet certainty. When I mentioned that Daniel and I were separating, he nodded once, didn't ask for details, and steered us toward other things. The relief of that was something I hadn't expected to feel so sharply. Driving home later, I took the long route along the lake. An old song came on the radio, something I hadn't heard in years, and the combination of the music and the dark water and the cold air through the cracked window undid something I'd been holding carefully in place. Not grief, exactly. More like recognition. I had spent 7 years adjusting myself around Daniel's silences, his expectations, his carefully maintained image, shrinking the parts of myself that didn't fit the frame he preferred. I had called it compromise. I was only now beginning to understand what it had actually cost. Sunday morning, coffee still brewing, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it ring twice, then answered. I've confirmed the lease termination with the building, he said. No greeting. You have until the end of the month. I'd suggest starting to arrange things. You might have asked whether I had somewhere to go. I said. You're a capable adult, Sophia. I looked at the folder on the table. Then I picked up the pen I'd left beside it 2 days ago. I'll sign today, I said. And Daniel, don't call me after this. We're done. A pause. Then, flatly, fine. I mean it. Don't call. I hung up, sat down, pulled the papers toward me, and signed my name in one clean, uninterrupted motion. No tremor, no hesitation, just the quiet closing of something that had already been over for longer than I'd admitted. 9 days after my attorney filed the paperwork, an email arrived from Daniel at 9:47 in the evening. The subject line was a single word, confirmed. I opened it. There was no body text, only an attachment. A marriage certificate issued by Harris County, Texas. Groom, Daniel Arthur Reeves. Bride, Vanessa Cole Harrington. Date of registration, 2 days after our divorce was finalized. Before I could fully process what I was reading, my phone rang. Daniel. You opened it, he said. The tone was something I'd never quite heard from him before. Not happy, exactly, but elevated. Satisfied with himself in a way that wanted an audience. I did, I said. I got married last weekend. We had a small ceremony at her family's property outside Houston. It was, he paused for effect. Everything I didn't have before. I said nothing. Her name is Vanessa. She's 33, comes from the Harrington family. They own a commercial development group across 4 states. Her father offered me a senior VP role at their Texas division, the kind of position I'd been working toward for 15 years. Another pause. She's also expecting, about 14 weeks. I sat with that for a moment. You planned all of this, I said. Not accusingly, just as an observation, turning it over. I made decisions, he said, like adults do. You're right, I said. Congratulations, Daniel. He seemed momentarily thrown by the absence of any reaction he could use. Then the call ended. I set the phone down and typed Vanessa Cole Harrington into the search bar. Her profile loaded within seconds. The photograph showed a woman in her early 30s. Bright, composed, the kind of face that photographed well from every angle. I scrolled slowly. Professionally curated posts, a few event photos, an art gallery opening in Houston, a tagged location in Scottsdale. And then, maybe 20 photos down, something made me stop. A group photo. Dated about 4 years back. A fundraising event of some kind, 8 or 9 people standing in a loose cluster. And there, slightly to the left of center, was a face I recognized. Not from the polished profile photos, but from somewhere much further back. I enlarged the image. Looked again. Vanessa Harrington had gone to the same college as me. She had been in my advanced composition seminar junior year. Back then, her name had been Vanessa Cole. Quiet, always seated near the back, someone who went largely unnoticed. I remembered her specifically because of an incident in that class, a critique session where another student had been unkind about her work, and she had simply absorbed it without expression, the way someone does when they've learned not to expect better. I called Claire, my closest friend from those years. Do you remember Vanessa Cole? From Kellerman's comp seminar? Claire was quiet for a beat. Vaguely. Mousy girl? Sat in the back? Why? I told her. The marriage, the timing, the Harrington family, the pregnancy, all of it. Oh, Claire's voice shifted into something more alert. I actually heard something about her a couple years back. Apparently she moved to New York after graduation, spent a few years in the art world, did quite a lot of work on her appearance. Not just one thing, multiple procedures over a few years. Completely transformed. Then she came back to Texas and somehow ended up connected to the Harrington family. There was a rumor she'd been involved with someone significantly older and already married while she was in New York, but nothing confirmed. A pause. She always seemed like someone who was very deliberately going somewhere, just not always transparently. I thanked her and ended the call. I sat in the quiet of the apartment for a while, looking at Vanessa's profile photo again. I felt no jealousy. I want to be precise about that. What I felt was something closer to clarity. Daniel had exchanged one life for a more architecturally impressive version of the same arrangement, a woman who appeared to offer everything he thought he'd been missing, in a setting designed to reflect well on him. He had optimized, and he believed that was the same thing as being happy. I hoped, distantly, that it would work out for him. I didn't particularly expect that it would. 6 weeks after Vanessa gave birth, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of reflex. Sophia, Daniel's voice. Quieter than I was used to. Something stripped of the usual surface confidence. How did you get a new number? New phone. A pause. I need to talk to you about something. I don't have anyone else to call. I leaned back in my chair. Go ahead. The baby. He stopped. Started again. She's healthy. She's fine. But Sophia, she doesn't look like either of us. Not Vanessa, not me. I mean, she genuinely looks like neither of us, like someone else entirely. I pressed my lips together. I had a DNA test done, he said quickly. She's mine. The results confirmed it. But the way she looks, it's like, I don't understand it. Vanessa is upset. I'm trying to make sense of it, and I keep going in circles. I thought carefully about what to say. Daniel, did Vanessa tell you much about what she looked like growing up? Silence. Because genetics are interesting, I continued. They don't record the most recent version of a person. They record every version, all the way back. More silence. Then, slowly, what are you saying? I'm saying that if two people have both significantly altered their appearance, whatever the reason, whatever the method, the child they have together won't necessarily resemble either of them as they currently appear. She'll resemble what's actually in the code. Daniel exhaled. A long, unsteady breath. I didn't know that. Most people don't think about it. Vanessa. He stopped. She won't hold her, since we came home from the hospital. Every time she looks at the baby, she just turns away. Her mother has been here all week because Vanessa won't pick her up. I don't know how to help. I don't know what to do. I felt the sadness of that. Not for Daniel, not for Vanessa, but for a child who had done nothing except arrive and be herself. That baby needs someone in that house to decide she's enough, I said, exactly as she is. Whether or not she matches the image anyone had in their head. I know. Then be that person. A long pause. I'm sorry, Sophia, for how I handled everything. I was. Daniel. My voice was gentle but final. You don't need to do this. I've already moved on. I genuinely hope things get better for you, and for your daughter especially. But this is the last time we speak. He didn't say anything else. I ended the call. Then I blocked the number. Nearly a year passed. Then a little more. The shape of my life changed so gradually and so thoroughly that looking back felt like looking at someone else's photographs, recognizable, but distant. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Evanston, close enough to the lake that on clear mornings I could see the water from the kitchen window. I kept my job at the hospital but negotiated a shift change that gave me my evenings back. I started a weekend pottery class, something I'd been loosely interested in for years and never made time for, and discovered that there's a particular kind of focus that comes from working with your hands, an absorption that clears the mind in ways that nothing else quite does. Marcus and I spent time together occasionally. Sunday walks, a few dinners, easy conversations that didn't require either of us to perform. We weren't rushing toward anything. We were just two people who found each other's company genuinely restful, which felt, at this point in my life, like a considerable gift. One Saturday afternoon in late autumn, I ran into Claire at a farmer's market near Wicker Park. We walked together for a while, catching up in the easy way of old friends who don't need to fill every silence. Then, as we paused at a produce stall, she lowered her voice. Have you heard anything about Daniel lately? Not directly? She glanced over. Word is Vanessa has retained a divorce attorney. Apparently Daniel got involved with someone at her family's company. An analyst, fairly new hire. Vanessa found out a few months ago. She stayed quiet initially for the baby's sake, but it's moved toward formal proceedings now. I nodded slowly. There's also something else, Claire added, with a slight hesitation. Their daughter started at a preschool program nearby. Apparently, some of the other children found out about Vanessa's surgeries. Who knows how these things get out at that age? And a few of them started saying things, teasing the little girl, telling her mother used to look different. Claire shook her head. The child came home crying 3 days in a row. I stopped walking. Something moved through my chest. Not satisfaction, not anything that felt like vindication. Just a clean, aching sadness for a small person who had nothing to do with any of it, who had simply been born into a set of choices made long before she arrived. She thought the baby would inherit the surgical results, Claire said quietly. That's what people are saying. She didn't think about what the genetics would actually carry. I didn't respond to that. There was nothing useful to add. We said goodbye at the corner, and I walked home through the park, dead leaves collecting along the path in the particular golden disorder of late autumn. I stopped at my usual bakery for an Americano and a small pastry, and I ate it sitting on a bench watching a dog chase something across the grass with the kind of complete, uncomplicated joy that's only available to creatures who don't think about the past. I thought about everything I'd been through. The anniversary dinner left untouched. The folder on the bed. The lease termination notice delivered like a bulletin. 7 years dismantled without the courtesy of a real conversation. And beyond that, the year of slowly putting myself back together, of learning to fill the space that fear and habit had kept occupied. I didn't feel bitter about any of it. I want to be precise about that too, the same way I was precise about the jealousy. The bitterness had been there, briefly, in the early months, but it had burned off, the way things do when you stop feeding them and start paying attention to what's actually in front of you. What I felt instead was grateful. Not to Daniel, not for what happened, but for who I'd become on the other side of it. A person who knew her own value without needing it confirmed. A person who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. If anyone ever asked me whether I'd forgiven Daniel, I think I'd say something like, forgiveness implies he still takes up enough room in my life to require it. He doesn't. I've simply moved on. Past him, past the version of myself that kept adjusting to fit his silence, past all of it. And walking home through those autumn leaves, coffee warm in my hand, the lake visible in the distance between the trees, I felt, in the clearest and most uncomplicated way, like myself. Sophia's story isn't about revenge. She never sought it. She didn't need to. She simply stepped back and allowed each person to arrive at the consequences of their own choices, while she quietly, deliberately, built something real. The people who had traded honesty for appearance and depth for status found that those trades have a long and specific cost. While Sophia, who had been cast aside for not being enough, discovered that she had always been exactly enough. She had simply been in the wrong room. What do you think of Sophia's journey? And what do you think about the choices that Daniel and Vanessa made, and the price they paid? Leave your thoughts below, and follow the channel for more stories about life, love, and the quiet strength it takes to begin again.